Evelyn Harper was a woman of the soil, born and raised on the sprawling acres of farmland that had been in her family for 3 generations. Her days began early, with the golden rays of sunrise painting the fields in hues of amber and green. She knew every inch of her land, the way the wind danced through the corn stalks, the sweet scent of ripe tomatoes hanging heavy on their vines, and the quiet hum of bees buzzing from flower to flower. This wasn't just a farm, it was her home, her sanctuary and her purpose. Her grandfather, a grizzled man with calloused hands and endless wisdom, used to say, "Evie, this land is alive. Treat it right, and it will feed you forever." Those words stuck with Evelyn long after he passed away, leaving her the sole caretaker of the 1,700-acre estate. It wasn't easy work, farming never was, but she loved it. Every harvest felt like a victory. Every seed planted carried hope for the future. And though life as a farmer could be lonely at times, Evelyn found comfort in knowing her efforts mattered. After all, her produce fed hundreds of families living in the nearby suburban housing development, managed by the Homeowners Association, HOA. The HOA subdivision sat just beyond the edge of Evelyn's property, its manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses standing in stark contrast to the wild beauty of her fields. Most residents didn't give much thought to where their food came from. They simply picked up fresh vegetables at the local market, unaware that nearly everything they ate originated from Evelyn's hard work. To them, she was invisible, just another faceless supplier. But Evelyn didn't mind. As long as people were fed, she was content. One crisp autumn morning, however, everything changed. Evelyn had loaded up her old red pickup truck with crates of carrots, potatoes, and pumpkins, ready to deliver them to the market. As she climbed into the driver's seat, something caught her eye. A folded piece of paper tucked under her windshield wiper. Curious, she unfolded it and read the hastily scribbled message. "They sold your land. Check the records before it's too late." Evelyn froze. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Who would sell her land? And how? Shaking off her shock, she decided to investigate immediately. That afternoon, instead of heading back to the farm, she drove straight to the county courthouse. With trembling fingers, she sifted through dusty files and computer databases until she stumbled upon something horrifying. Documents filed months earlier claimed large portions of her farmland had been abandoned and subsequently sold to a developer named Victor Langston. How could this happen? Evelyn hadn't abandoned anything. In fact, she worked tirelessly to keep the farm running smoothly despite rising costs and unpredictable weather. Someone had forged signatures and falsified information, making it look like she'd walked away from the property years ago. Betrayal burned deep within her chest. How dare anyone take what wasn't theirs? As she left the courthouse, anger gave way to fear. If these documents were legitimate, then legally speaking, parts of her land no longer belonged to her. What would happen to her crops, her livelihood, her legacy? Panic clawed at her throat as she drove home, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles turned white. When she arrived, she parked her truck and stepped out into the cool evening air. The sight of her fields stretching endlessly before her brought tears to her eyes. This land wasn't just dirt and plants. It was her identity. It held memories of childhood summers chasing fireflies, of laughter shared with her parents during harvest season, of quiet moments spent alone beneath the stars. Losing it would mean losing a part of herself. That night, Evelyn barely slept. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by maps, legal papers, and photographs proving her family's connection to the land. By dawn, she had made up her mind. No matter what it took, she would fight to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Little did she know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would test her strength, challenge her faith, and ultimately, change her life and the lives of those around her forever. The next morning, Evelyn woke up with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in years. She couldn't do this alone. Not against powerful entities like the HOA and a wealthy developer, but she knew exactly who to turn to first. Mr. Thompson, a seasoned attorney based in the nearest town, had helped her draft her will a few years ago. He was sharp, honest, and well-versed in real estate disputes. If anyone could help her navigate this mess, it was him. After loading fresh eggs and homemade bread into a basket as a token of gratitude, Evelyn drove to Mr. Thompson's office. His secretary greeted her warmly and ushered her into his cluttered but cozy workspace. Papers were stacked neatly on his desk, and shelves lined with law books gave the room an air of authority. Evelyn explained her situation, showing him the forged documents and voicing her suspicions about the HOA's involvement. Mr. Thompson listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples thoughtfully. "Evelyn," he said finally, "this isn't going to be easy. These laws about abandoned properties are tricky. They're meant to prevent neglect, sure, but they're also open to abuse by people looking to exploit loopholes." He went on to explain that while the HOA technically followed proper procedures, there might still be room to challenge the sale, if Evelyn could prove continuous use of the land. However, time was critical. Construction crews were already preparing to move in, and once bulldozers started tearing up the soil, reversing the damage would become exponentially harder. Armed. With Mr. Thompson's advice, Evelyn returned to the farm, her mind racing with possibilities. She needed allies, people who understood the importance of her fight. So the following day she visited the HOA-controlled subdivision, hoping to rally support from the very neighbors she supplied with fresh produce. Walking door to door, Evelyn introduced herself and shared her story. Some residents listened politely, nodding sympathetically, but most dismissed her concerns. "We need more space for new homes," one man said bluntly. "Your farm is nice and all, but progress waits for no one." Others accused her of exaggerating or trying to stir up trouble. Feeling defeated, Evelyn trudged back to her truck, fighting back tears. Just then, a voice called out to her. Turning around, she saw a middle-aged woman standing on her porch, holding a basket filled with Evelyn's vegetables. "You're the one who grows these, aren't you?" the woman asked kindly. "Yes," Evelyn replied, forcing a smile. "I am." "Well, I don't know much about lawsuits or developers, but I do know good food when I taste it," the woman said. "My name's Linda Myers. Can we talk more about this? Maybe there's something we can do to help." Linda's kindness lifted Evelyn's spirits slightly, but the uphill battle ahead loomed large. Back at the farm, she pored over old letters, tax records, and photographs, building a case to prove her family's uninterrupted stewardship of the land. Meanwhile, bulldozers rumbled closer each day, churning up patches of earth that had once nurtured crops. Then came another blow. One evening, as Evelyn tended to her chickens, she noticed the water pump sputtering weakly. By morning, the flow had stopped entirely. Without access to water, her remaining crops would wither, and her animals would suffer. Furious, she called the local utility company, only to learn that the HOA had cut off service to her property. "They're playing dirty," Mr. Thompson told her when she updated him, "but we're not backing down." Though exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, Evelyn refused to give up. She rigged temporary irrigation systems using barrels and hoses, hauling water by hand whenever necessary. Each drop felt like a small act of defiance against those trying to push her out. Despite the mounting challenges, Evelyn began to notice subtle shifts in public opinion. A few neighbors, inspired by Linda's courage, started questioning the HOA's actions. Others expressed guilt over benefiting from her labor while turning a blind eye to her plight. Slowly but surely, cracks began forming in the wall of indifference surrounding her. Yet the biggest obstacle still lay ahead. Victor Langston, the developer eager to transform her fields into concrete jungles, showed no signs of relenting. His arrogance infuriated Evelyn, but it also fueled her resolve. She vowed to stand firm, no matter how daunting the odds. After all, this wasn't just about saving her farm anymore. It was about justice, integrity, and proving that even the smallest voices could make a difference. Evelyn's fight took a dramatic turn when she decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't let bulldozers destroy her fields without putting up a fight. One morning, before the sun had fully risen, Evelyn parked her old tractor right in the middle of the dirt road leading to her farmland. She tied a large hand-painted sign to the front that read, "This land is mine." The bold red letters stood out against the pale blue sky, catching the attention of anyone who dared approach. Word spread quickly about Evelyn's blockade. Neighbors driving by honked their horns, some in support, others in frustration. Local. News crews arrived within hours, eager to capture footage of the fiery farmer standing her ground. Reporters asked questions, photographers snapped pictures, and soon Evelyn found herself at the center of a media storm. At first, Evelyn was nervous about the attention. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight and worried she might say the wrong thing. But as she spoke passionately about her family's history with the land, her voice grew stronger. "This isn't just about me," she told one reporter. "It's about protecting something bigger than all of us. Once this soil is paved over, it's gone forever." Her words resonated with many viewers, especially those who valued sustainability and local agriculture. Social media exploded with hashtags like Save Harper Farms and Stand with Evelyn. People from across the country began sharing her story, sending messages of encouragement and even donating money to help cover her legal fees. Victor Langston, however, was not amused. He saw Evelyn's protest as nothing more than a nuisance, a delay in his plans to build luxury homes on what he now considered his property. Frustrated, he called an emergency meeting with the HOA board, demanding they remove her from the premises immediately. "They're ruining my reputation," Victor shouted, slamming his fist on the conference table. "Every day that woman stays there, I lose credibility with investors. Do something." The HOA president, Richard Hargrove, nodded nervously. He didn't want to admit it, but public opinion was starting to sway against them. Still, Richard couldn't afford to back down now. Too much money and pride was at stake. To escalate matters, the HOA hired private security guards to monitor Evelyn's movements. They claimed it was for safety reasons, but everyone knew the real purpose: intimidation. The guards patrolled the area around the clock, glaring at Evelyn whenever she passed by. Despite the pressure, Evelyn refused to budge. Her determination inspired others to join her cause. Linda Myers rallied a group of sympathetic neighbors, organizing volunteer shifts to keep watch with Evelyn overnight. Together, they brought blankets, snacks, and thermoses of hot coffee to stay warm during chilly evenings. One particularly tense night, Evelyn spotted headlights approaching in the distance. Thinking it was another security patrol, she braced herself. But instead of guards, a truck pulled up carrying several young activists from a nearby environmental organization. They'd heard about Evelyn's struggle online and wanted to lend their support. "We're here to help," said Mia, the group's leader, stepping out of the truck. "You're not alone in this fight." Overwhelmed with gratitude, Evelyn welcomed them warmly. With their help, she set up a makeshift camp near the entrance of her fields. Tents were pitched, banners were hung, and songs of resistance echoed through the crisp night air. What started as a solo protest had grown into a movement. Victor Langston watched all of this unfold with growing anger. He ordered his lawyers to file a restraining order against Evelyn, claiming her actions were interfering with his business operations. But the judge sided with Evelyn, ruling that she had every right to remain on her own property. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued gathering evidence to strengthen her case. She spent hours poring over old photographs, tax records, and handwritten journals left behind by her grandfather. One evening, while sorting through boxes in her attic, she stumbled upon a treasure trove of documents detailing decades of crop yields, equipment purchases, and maintenance logs. These papers proved beyond doubt that her family had consistently worked the land year after year. Armed with this new evidence, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of hope. She shared her findings with Mr. Thompson, who immediately filed additional motions in court. For the first time since the ordeal began, Evelyn allowed herself to believe that justice might prevail. Just as momentum seemed to be shifting in Evelyn's favor, disaster struck. Late one night, flames erupted from the barn where she stored tools, seeds, and harvested crops. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky, lighting up the darkness like a beacon. Evelyn woke to the sound of crackling fire and ran outside barefoot, her heart pounding with terror. "No," she screamed, rushing toward the blaze. Volunteers from the camp tried to hold her back, fearing the structure would collapse at any moment. Firefighters arrived shortly after, battling the inferno with hoses and axes. By the time the flames were extinguished, the barn was reduced to charred rubble. Everything inside, months' worth of supplies, irreplaceable heirlooms, and crucial documents, was gone. Devastated, Evelyn sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. The arson attack felt personal, like a direct assault on her spirit. Who could do such a thing, and why? The next day, investigators determined the fire had been deliberately set. Someone had doused the barn with accelerant and lit a match. Though no suspects were identified immediately, suspicions pointed toward Victor Langston or someone working on his behalf. News of the arson spread rapidly, sparking outrage among Evelyn's supporters. Protesters gathered outside City Hall, holding candles and chanting slogans like "Justice for Harper Farms" and "Stop Corporate Greed." Even some formerly indifferent neighbors expressed sympathy, realizing the lengths to which powerful entities would go to silence dissent. But despite the public outcry, Evelyn felt defeated. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders and doubt crept into her mind. Was this fight worth it? Could she really win against opponents with so much money and influence? In search of clarity, Evelyn visited her grandfather's grave. Sitting, cross-legged on the dewy grass, she talked to him as if he were still alive. "I don't know what to do, Grandpa," she whispered, clutching a handful of earth. "They've taken everything from me. The water, the barn, my peace of mind. How can I keep going?" As she sat there quietly, memories flooded back. She remembered her grandfather teaching her how to plant her first seed, telling her stories about the Great Depression, and reminding her always to stand up for what was right. His voice echoed in her mind. "Life will test you, Evie, but remember, storms make trees dig deeper roots." Those words reignited a spark within her. Evelyn realized she couldn't give up, not yet. Giving up would mean letting Victor and the HOA win, erasing not only her legacy but also the hard work of generations before her. Back at the farm, cracks began forming within the HOA. Several members grew uneasy as public scrutiny intensified. Linda Myers discovered a series of suspicious emails between Richard Hargrove and Victor Langston, revealing how the HOA knowingly falsified abandonment claims. When confronted, Richard denied involvement, but Linda recorded his stammering excuses and shared the audio with Evelyn. "This is our smoking gun," Evelyn told Mr. Thompson triumphantly. With undeniable proof of misconduct, they prepared to present the evidence in court. At the same time, Linda convinced other disillusioned HOA members to speak out publicly. Their testimonies added weight to Evelyn's case, turning the tide of public opinion even further in her favor. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn slept soundly, knowing she wasn't fighting alone anymore. The road ahead remained uncertain, but she faced it with newfound strength. The arsonists may have burned her barn, but they hadn't extinguished her resolve. If anything, the attack had fanned the flames of her determination, pushing her closer to victory. Evelyn's turning point came during a tense HOA meeting that would later be described as the moment the tide turned. Linda Myers, armed with the damning emails and audio recordings she'd gathered, stood before the board members and a packed audience of residents. The room buzzed with anticipation, some attendees curious, others visibly uneasy. Evelyn sat quietly in the back, her hands clasped tightly together, watching as Linda took center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. She held up her phone, playing the recording of Richard Hargrove stumbling over his words when confronted about the forged documents. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people realized their leaders had knowingly deceived them and broken the law. "This isn't just about Evelyn Harper or her farm," Linda continued, her tone firm but calm. "It's about integrity. It's about accountability. We trusted you to act in our best interests, not sell out to corporate greed. And now, because of your actions, we're complicit in something shameful." The room erupted into murmurs. Some residents shifted uncomfortably in their seats while others nodded in agreement. One elderly woman stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've lived here for 30 years and I never imagined this kind of corruption could happen in our community. How could you do this?" Richard Hargrove tried to defend himself, stammering excuses about economic growth and progress, but no one was buying it anymore. His colleagues on the board exchanged uneasy glances, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the scandal. By the end of the meeting, several board members publicly apologized to Evelyn and announced they would support reversing the sale of her land. Richard resigned on the spot, his face flushed with humiliation. Word of the meeting spread like wildfire, thanks in part to social media. Evelyn's story gained even more traction, drawing attention from national news outlets and environmental organizations. A prominent investigative journalist named Sarah Collins reached out to Evelyn, offering to dig deeper into Victor Langston's business practices. What Sarah uncovered painted a damning picture. Langston had a long history of exploiting legal loopholes to seize land under questionable circumstances. With public pressure mounting, Victor grew increasingly desperate. He attempted to discredit Evelyn by spreading rumors that she was exaggerating her losses or exaggerating the importance of her farm. But these tactics backfired spectacularly. Supporters rallied around Evelyn, flooding social media with photos of her fields, testimonials from loyal customers, and heartfelt messages of solidarity. One particularly moving post came from a young mother who wrote, "My son has severe allergies, and Evelyn's organic produce is the only food he can eat safely. If they take her farm, what happens to families like mine?" The overwhelming support gave Evelyn the strength to push forward. She worked tirelessly with Mr. Thompson to prepare for the upcoming court hearing, knowing this would be her chance to expose the truth once and for all. Meanwhile, Evelyn also began thinking about the bigger picture. This fight wasn't just about reclaiming her land. It was about preventing similar injustices from happening to others. Inspired by the grassroots movement supporting her, she partnered with local schools and nonprofits to create educational programs about land rights, sustainable farming, and the dangers of unchecked corporate power. As the days passed, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose. The arson attack had been devastating, but it had also galvanized her supporters and strengthened her resolve. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months she allowed herself to feel hopeful. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Reporters, activists, and concerned citizens filled every available seat, their eyes fixed on Evelyn as she sat at the plaintiff's table alongside Mr. Thompson. Across the aisle, Victor Langston looked smug, flanked by his team of high-priced attorneys. When the judge called the court to order, Mr. Thompson wasted no time presenting Evelyn's case. He started with the photographic evidence proving her family's continuous use of the land, followed by the tax records and maintenance logs salvaged from the ashes of her barn. Then came the pièce de résistance, Linda's recordings of Richard Hargrove admitting to the fraudulent sale. Victor's lawyers tried to argue that the documents were irrelevant and that Evelyn had failed to properly register her claims, but their arguments fell flat. The judge listened intently, occasionally nodding as Mr. Thompson dismantled each of their points. Finally, it was Evelyn's turn to speak. Standing before the court, she took a deep breath and began sharing her story, not just as a farmer, but as a person deeply connected to the land. She spoke about her grandfather's teachings, the sacrifices her family had made to keep the farm running, and the countless lives her produce had touched. "When I look at my fields," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat, "I don't see dirt and crops. I see memories. I see hope. I see a future where communities come together to protect what truly matters. Please don't let greed erase that." Her words resonated with everyone in the room, including the judge. After deliberating for less than an hour, the court ruled in Evelyn's favor. The fraudulent sale was nullified, and her ownership of the 1,700 acres was officially reinstated. Cheers erupted in the courtroom, and tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she hugged Mr. Thompson and Linda tightly. Victor Langston stormed out of the courthouse furious but powerless to change the outcome. Realizing further litigation would only damage his reputation further, He agreed to settle with Evelyn. In exchange for a modest refund of his initial investment, he dropped all claims to the land. With the legal battle behind her, Evelyn focused on rebuilding. Neighbors who had once ignored her now offered help in droves. Volunteers arrived daily to assist with repairs, planting new crops, and constructing a new barn. Donations poured in from across the country, allowing Evelyn to upgrade her equipment and expand her operations. But perhaps the most meaningful change came from within the HOA subdivision itself. Residents who had previously dismissed Evelyn's contributions now embraced her as a valued member of the community. They organized weekly farmers' markets featuring her produce, hosted fundraisers to support her recovery efforts, and even created a mural celebrating her resilience. Determined to ensure nothing like this could happen again, Evelyn worked with lawmakers to propose stricter regulations around so-called abandonment clauses. Her advocacy caught the attention of state legislators, leading to reforms aimed at protecting small landowners from predatory practices. Years later, Harper Farms became a symbol of perseverance and unity. Evelyn expanded her outreach programs, teaching children about sustainable agriculture and inspiring a new generation of farmers. As she walked through her fields at sunset, surrounded by the fruits of her labor, she smiled, knowing her grandfather would be proud. The land had tested her, challenged her, and nearly broken her, but it had also made her stronger. And as long as she drew breath, she vowed to protect it with everything she had. Years after the dust had settled on her legal battle, Evelyn Harper stood at the edge of her fields, watching the golden sunlight bathe the crops in a warm glow. The scars of the past were still visible. The charred remains of her old barn had been replaced by a sturdy new structure, and the once barren patches of land bulldozed by Victor Langston's crew were now lush with greenery. But what truly amazed Evelyn wasn't just how far her farm had come. It was how much the community around her had changed. The HOA subdivision that had once treated her as an outsider now thrived because of its connection to Harper Farms. Every Saturday morning, residents gathered at the local farmers market, eagerly purchasing fresh produce grown just a stone's throw away. Children ran between stalls laughing as they sampled juicy strawberries and crisp cucumbers. Parents chatted with Evelyn, thanking her for teaching their kids about where food comes from. It was a stark contrast to the hostility she'd faced years earlier. Evelyn's victory hadn't just saved her farm, it had transformed the entire neighborhood. People who had once prioritized manicured lawns over sustainability now planted vegetable gardens in their backyards. Some even joined Evelyn's workshops, learning how to compost, conserve water, and grow their own food. The mural celebrating her resilience became a beloved landmark, inspiring passers-by with its vibrant depiction of fields, roots, and hands nurturing the earth. But perhaps the most profound change was within Evelyn herself. She had started this journey as a lone farmer, fighting to protect her legacy. Along the way, she discovered strength she didn't know she had, and the power of community. Linda Myers, once a stranger, had become one of her closest friends. Together, they co-founded an organization called Roots United, dedicated to advocating for small farmers and educating communities about land rights. Their work reached far beyond Evelyn's hometown, influencing policies statewide and earning recognition from national agricultural groups. Victor Langston, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. His reputation tarnished by the expose and subsequent lawsuits, he struggled to secure new projects. Though Evelyn never gloated about his downfall, she couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction, knowing that justice had prevailed, not just for her but for others like her who might have fallen victim to his schemes. Life on the farm continued to flourish. With the support of volunteers and donations, Evelyn modernized her operations, investing in eco-friendly irrigation systems and renewable energy sources. She hired several locals, giving them stable jobs and a chance to learn sustainable farming practices. One of her employees, a young woman named Mia, reminded Evelyn of herself at that age, passionate, hardworking, and full of dreams. Seeing Mia thrive gave Evelyn hope for the future. On quieter days, Evelyn often visited her grandfather's grave, bringing flowers and sharing stories of everything that had happened since his passing. "You were right, Grandpa," she said during one such visit. "The storms did make me dig deeper roots, and look what grew from them." Her story also inspired others facing similar battles. Farmers across the country reached out to Evelyn, seeking advice on how to fight corporate greed or navigate complex legal systems. She welcomed each call, offering guidance and encouragement. "You're stronger than you think," she would tell them, "and you don't have to do it alone." One autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn hosted a special event at the farm, a celebration of resilience and renewal. Hundreds of people attended, including former HOA members, activists, journalists, and families who had supported her cause. Lanterns lit up the fields, casting a soft glow over tables laden with food made from her harvest. A local band played lively tunes, and laughter filled the air. As Evelyn addressed the crowd, her voice carried both gratitude and wisdom. "This land taught me something important," she said, looking out at the sea of faces. "It taught me that we're all connected, to the soil beneath our feet, to the people around us, and to the choices we make. When we stand together, we can overcome anything." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing across the field she had fought so hard to protect. That night, as Evelyn gazed up at the starry sky, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Her journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place of purpose and fulfillment. Harper Farms wasn't just a farm anymore. It was a symbol of hope, unity, and the enduring power of determination. And Evelyn knew, deep in her heart, that her grandfather's words would always ring true. "Land isn't just dirt, it's life. Protect it and it will protect you."